Welcome to our latest edition of our Brain Talks, the podcast series under the Brain Innovation Days umbrella. In today's Brain Talk, we are catching up with a speaker from our latest Brain Innovation Days digital session on fast-tracking brain innovation in times of COVID-19, where we are pleased to welcome Professor Sameer Zuberi, President of the European Paediatric Neurology Society, and consultant pediatric neurologist at the Royal Hospital for Children in Glasgow. Welcome, Professor Zuberi. During the last event, you briefly introduced us to vCreate, Neuro, a secure video technology developed to support clinical teams with diagnosis, management, and decision-making in hospitals and the community. We wanted to invite you back today to learn a little more about the innovation and how it has improved patient care, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. I will be your moderator for today, Frédéric Destrebec, Executive Director of the European Brain Council, one of the founding partners of the Brain Innovation Days. So let's get started. So Sameer, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Maybe before we get started on vCreate, you'd like to introduce and say a word about EPNS, your society?
Thank you, Fred. It's a pleasure to speak to you this morning. So the EPNS is a society of over 1,700 child neurologists from throughout Europe, and now increasingly we have members all around the world. We represent our members, pediatric neurologists, but we also represent the needs of children with neurological disorders throughout Europe. So we're very active society. We do have lots of educational programs, a biennial congress, and increasingly, in collaboration with the European Brain Council, we're looking to try and promote child neurology and the needs of children with neurological disorders at a European level.
And today you are speaking to us in this capacity, but also you wanted to maybe make a small introductory remark before we present the vCreate Neuro.
Yeah, so I'm speaking about the vCreate Neuro platform that my team in Glasgow and colleagues in the UK developed in partnership with a technology company called vCreate. So my role in this has been the clinical lead and part designer, and our hospital and our region in Scotland gets special discounts on the platform because of this, but I don't have any shareholding or other financial relationship at present with vCreate.
Okay, right. But before we get a little bit more deeply into this platform, can you tell us a little bit more why video recordings are so important in neurology and child neurology in particular, and how they are used in clinical practice?
So video is critical to neurological care. I think since the first Super 8 cameras became available to neurologists, they've been using video in our clinical practice. When things go wrong with the brain, you see changes in behavior, you see changes in function, in movement, you see paroxysmal attacks. And to be able to record those and be able to review those on video is invaluable for clinicians. So all clinicians all around the world use video. In the epilepsy world, we use video alongside EEG for diagnosis of paroxysmal events. For movement disorders, we use video for analysis of movement disorders and also assessing treatment progress. We use videos increasingly over many years for teaching our students and going through clinical signs. We use videos for peer review as well. So we sit around at meetings, we look at clinical features, we may look at seizures, and we discuss these with our colleagues. So video has many uses in neurology, in psychiatry as well, for behavioral changes. Video is also invaluable. So we spend a lot of time with our colleagues in child and adolescent mental health services looking at videos of children's behavior, looking at to see whether these paroxysmal events of change in behavior could be neurological. Do they have a neuropsychiatric basis? And also assessing children's development video can be invaluable as well as a record. As many people viewing this podcast who are parents know, just looking at their children's development just through video is increasingly something that families do, and doing that for children with neurological disorders and adults as well is critical for observation, and also helping us decide whether our treatments are efficacious or not.
And you mentioned videos taken by patients themselves or by their families or carers, but were there challenges in the way these were used for clinical care purposes? And if so, what have they been?
So if you can imagine the video and images in clinical practice are always looked at with a high level of security sometimes, and lots of other information, because you cannot anonymize easily images, whether that's a picture, a video. And also videos are big files. So storing them and transferring them in clinical records has been a real problem. So we have a medical imaging management system in our hospital which can store photographs, but it really can't cope with big videos. And also getting videos from families to the hospital has been a significant issue, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, when everyone carries a smartphone. So there are 3.5 billion smartphones in the world, and families, people with all sorts of neurological disorders will take videos of their children, or patients will ask their families to take videos of themselves, which they can then show their clinicians, particularly if they're having attacks which come and go, which you cannot see then in the clinic. Mm-hmm. But transferring those into hospital has been a difficulty, because you can imagine the levels of security you need for video transfer. Also, when you get at the other end, where do you store it? How do you make sure that it's only accessed by the correct people? So hospitals have been very reluctant to cope with this, and particularly with the absolutely appropriate GDPR regulations that we have in Europe, and they are mirrored now in the UK as well. There are lots of concerns about security and clinical governance. And I think many hospitals have just not wanted to go to that place where they're thinking about using videos and how they get them from patients. We have been receiving videos by patients through email. So they tried to send them to us through email, but email is not a good place to store video. It's not secure, it's not governed appropriately, and also the files are often too big. Sometimes families are very ingenious and make their own cloud storage solutions and send us the password links, so that we can look at these videos. But then what do we do with the videos then? How do we review them in the future? How do we show them to other colleagues? So there have been many challenges around, I think, unlocking the potential of video in the community for neurological care. And I think this solution that we've developed is part of unlocking that potential.
Yeah, I guess that's where vCreate Neuro is now coming about. I mean, maybe you can tell us more a little bit as to how the idea emerged and the opportunity arose, and how the platform actually came into question, and maybe also how it works to address the challenges that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So myself, and I know this is the same for colleagues in other hospitals in Europe, have been trying to find solutions to this problem for many years. Some hospitals have developed almost like secure Dropboxes where people can send a video in and it's like a Dropbox, but there's no more classification or technology around that at all, and there's limited functionality for the patients to add additional data to link to the video. So we were fortunate in Glasgow because of a confluence of circumstances. So I had a colleague in our neonatal unit, the neonatal intensive care unit, who was approached by a father. Now this father is a car mechanic, and as a car mechanic, he is asked by his garage to take a video of cars when they are in for servicing, and then they are sent to the clients.
Yeah, that's a new feature that I experienced,
Yeah.
to
So he
get
said,
security, that they do the job basically.
yeah, to show that they actually done the
Yeah.
job. So he said, I do this for my clients. Can you do? I can't always be in the hospital with my baby now. Can you send me a video of my baby? So my colleague Neil Patel, who's a neonatologist, he went round and looked for some companies, video companies, and quite a few of them said, no, we're not interested in this. This isn't our field. And then he found one company called vCreate, which at that time was working not in the health sector at all, but was doing videos internally for companies, including some of the Formula One companies like McLaren and other companies, just internal videos. And they said, yeah, this sounds interesting. We'll just do it for you just as a little project on the side. And so they developed this system where you could send videos the nurses would take videos of the babies in the hospital out to the families when they couldn't be there. So this is part of what we call family integrated care. So it makes the families feel a lot closer to their baby when they can't be there. Improve the connection between the families and the hospital, and it had lots of other positive effects that you couldn't imagine. For example, mothers seeing their babies, and they produce more breast milk. Mm-hmm. So they were able to express breast milk and give that to their baby who is in intensive care. It helped the grandparents see the baby in the hospital. And now that proved incredibly successful, and is now that what we call vCreate Diaries is in more than 200 hospitals around the UK and more than 10 countries. And I think overall in the system, more than 300,000 videos have been sent. So that also moved into pediatric intensive care units and with COVID into adult intensive care units as well. Because obviously, families could not go into ICUs. So the vCreate Diaries created a platform from sending videos from the hospital out to the patient. And so it had to go through all the clinical governance, security, GDPR regulations that you would need. But interestingly, the hospitals were prepared to do this because of this family integrated care project. It didn't seem, I think for some of the managers that, well, these aren't really clinical videos. But in fact, it fulfilled all the security for clinical videos. So then I started talking to Ben Moore, who's the founder of vCreate, and Neil, who'd developed this in the neonatal unit. And we said, can we use this to send videos into the hospital for our patients? Because we use so many videos. And we've had this real struggle. So we started thinking about this more than 2.5 years ago and developing projects. We put some applications in for grants. We didn't get grants, and then COVID hit. And then we said to the Scottish Government, can we have a grant to develop this project? So Scottish Government Technology Enabled Care gave us funding to develop this at the end of March 2020. And we were able to establish the system then in all of the paediatric neurology and adult neurology centres in Scotland. Now, Scotland's a relatively small country, 5.5 million. So that was 8 tertiary university services. So we rolled it out really quickly. And because of COVID as well, I think we had clinical governance approval in Glasgow. So they fast-tracked that through, and then because of changes in COVID, that governance that had been approved in Glasgow, then the other hospitals around the country were able to take that same approval template, and they had to go through some processes, but there was a system where they could say, well, actually, one NHS hospital has approved it, we can now approve it. So that sped up the process as well.
So it's a very concrete example on how COVID actually became, I wouldn't say an opportunity, but I would maybe an accelerator or facilitator. But the technology, if I understand correctly, the technology was already there. It was just a way to adapt it and make it fit for purpose for your use.
Yeah.
That means getting the videos rather than sending them out of the hospital.
Yeah.
But then would you say that COVID also helped in the way this type of technology was then accepted and embraced by the
Yeah.
staff or by the families or
Yeah.
the patients
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started in Glasgow in May the 1st of last year. And we now have um, uh, almost 1,000 patients just in our service have used it. And we just 2 days ago, we reached a 2,000 video mark just within our Glasgow service. So it's been adopted really well by families. So I think it's also the fact that people are really used to taking a lot of video on their phone now, and they're used to using that technology, whether it's for Instagram, for WhatsApp, for all these different social media applications. So people are very familiar with using their mobile phones. So families, um, we set up this system where we can register families for the system securely. We can register them for either an epilepsy and paroxysmal disorders instance or movement disorders. So what this means then is that when they upload the videos, they also upload a series of questions that will, it's almost like me taking a history to them of the event or the movement disorder. So then they upload the video securely, and we can look at the video with all this information linked into it and assess it. And then within the system, we can also classify the videos as to what they are. So in terms of different seizure, one of my other roles in the past was I chaired the ILE Classification Commission. So we can classify as per the 2017 classifications of epilepsy. And similarly for movement disorders, we can classify by genetic movements. So we have now this big teaching, education, and clinical management system for videos as well. So families really embraced it. And if you imagine in Scotland, we have some of the most densely populated parts of Europe within Glasgow and Edinburgh in what we call the Central Belt. But then we have some of the most remote areas in the Highlands. We have almost 200 islands around Scotland. So we have families that are on the islands that couldn't be travelling to Glasgow, normally would fly in. And we were able to manage them by seeing videos of their children having episodes. We then can call them, telephone them. And many of the families found this incredibly helpful. So the families really embraced it. The other thing that we did as part of the system was we have questionnaires that we send the families after they upload, because we're continuing to evaluate the system, and we found various themes emerging. So families felt more empowered. They felt much more connected to their clinical teams, and they also felt safer. Because they knew, my child's having something new, I can get this to my clinical team much more rapidly. So it proved very successful in Scotland very rapidly in adult and paediatric neurology. And then I began to talk about it at some clinical meetings, and then other colleagues from other centres in England started hearing about it. So now it's spread to many different hospitals, including Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, Evelina Hospital, Oxford, Newcastle, Manchester, many other centres, and internationally as well. So there are many potential uses for the system.
But you mentioned a lot of let's say benefits from your end, as well as from families. I mean, can you really see that this is going to transform clinical practice on your end for the future? Because obviously with COVID-19, let's say enabling that or fast tracking this, but do you see that this is going to shift completely the way your practice is going to be organized, or do we need a kind of balance? Because a lot of persons we have been talking to insist a lot on the fact that we are losing a little bit the doctor to patient direct relationship and these kind of things. How would you describe it in this
Yeah, so
in
I
this
don't think
context.
this doesn't replace the clinical visit. It doesn't replace the examination, but it enhances it. So we're using it with all our patients, even the ones that live 2 miles away from the hospital, that can come in and see us very frequently, because. I think it's transformed our clinical practice because it's being embedded in all different parts of our practice. So now, even for standard referrals to our service, if it's a referral where we think there's going to be a movement problem or a seizure or a query a seizure, or a change in behavior, we can ask the families to register for the system and video the event. Mm-hmm. And quite often we get that video very quickly, and we can see this is a very benign, this is a normal behavior in a child, and we can quickly either communicate, we can even communicate through the system with the family, because it has a system, or we can just give them a phone call and reassure them, this is not an epileptic attack, it's a normal, episode of excitement in a toddler. Don't worry, it's not an infantile spasm or a seizure, and we prevent clinic visits. So we are embedding it in the video system in our referral pathway. So it will, and actually what we're doing now is we're having a specific type of referral where we'll see the video, and then we won't appoint the person until someone has seen the video, particularly if we know that we've got the video, and then we'll decide where they go. So it's saving a lot of clinic visits, but also it's prioritizing lots of investigations as well. So a GP will, a general practitioner in the UK might, say, "Oh, I've seen a child, but I'd like to see, with a change in gait, walking slightly differently." Mm-hmm. And this was something that we used in COVID very rapidly. "Oh, can you send a video?" We saw the video. The video showed that the child clearly had a weakness down one side. So that child then that day is brought up to the hospital, has an urgent scan, and we sadly found a posterior fossa tumor. Mm-hmm. So and in other events, sometimes you may see a seizure, a generalized clonic seizure, which has a risk linked to it, such as sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. We can see these events and then say, well, actually, we need to prioritize that person comes for an EEG. We don't need to see them in the clinic and then decide what to do and then send them for a test.
That's often, in the case of epilepsy, that's often an example taken by families, particularly in the case of young children, to say, okay, my child had a seizure. I need to come with him to put him in observation for 2 days. Nothing happens. And then the conclusion is that everything goes fine, but then back home, seizure happens. So clearly, I can see the way by which we can embed such a kind of solution into, let's say, as was mentioned in the introduction, decision making or diagnosis. But can you see plans for the future or future developments in order to push it probably even further?
Yeah. So I think we've got lots of different. So we are also using screen capture technology with the platform. So within the hospital. So we talked very much now about videos coming from patients into the hospital. But now we're also thinking about what we call our clinician to clinician pathway. So this is when a doctor can take a video in the emergency department, on the ward, maybe when they've gone to retrieve a patient from another hospital, and then they can send it to another colleague. So particularly if you imagine an accident and emergency, they're seeing all sorts of events, sometimes in terms of neurology, seizures, status epilepticus. We know that a large proportion of status epilepticus that goes to A&Es is actually what we would call pseudo-status epilepticus. So this is a functional neurological disorder, not an epileptic seizure. But many of those people are actually treated with a lot of drugs. They're sometimes intubated, sent to intensive care. when there may be other more neurobehavioral mechanisms underlying this change in behavior. But if an expert could see that, they could probably say very confidently to an A&E physician, this is clearly not an epileptic seizure, don't treat like that. So we're developing a clinician-to-clinician pathways, so that in the hospital you can take a video and send it through the platform to another clinician. I'm now dealing with my colleagues in the smaller hospitals around Glasgow, so they also have the vCreate system, so they can take a video, and then I get an email which says, Sameer, please would you look at this video? I can then click on a link, I can look at the video, and then within their system I can comment, write my comments, and then they get an alert once I've written the comments. So it facilitates that communication between myself as the tertiary specialist and someone in the community. So you can imagine this is what we're doing for neurology, but now the platform is also being used we're extending it out to other medical specialties, so ophthalmology. So there's amazing technology now that where you can look at, even with a mobile phone, you can take a picture of the retina, and you can do an examination of the eyes. So we have a system now where we're using the platform for ophthalmology, and that we're hoping to put that out into optometry departments as well. Optometrists can then link into the hospital systems. Cardiology there's a pilot going on in the northeast of England where they can share screen capture of echocardiograms that are done in some of the district hospitals with the regional centre. So, and even one of my colleagues in the allergy service is using it because you can take videos of allergies, rashes, and dermatology. So it can be, and video is actually a lot better for rashes and skin things than still pictures, because you get more of a three-dimensional view. So there are many pilots going on, as you can imagine now, in Scotland with the system and in other parts of the UK.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few clinical disciplines where obviously imaging is also playing a very big role in this since a few decades now. But with the progress of imaging, a lot of progress in clinical practice could be made.
Yeah.
But obviously a big game changer that came into the mix now is artificial intelligence and machine learning in that respect. Is that something that you've already discussed with vCreate as to how to embed or which could offer an extension?
Yeah, so that's something that we're very, very interested in. So we have, as you can imagine, this database of clinical videos is building up very rapidly. So we have now increasing by 600 at least a month. So we now have almost 6,000 videos in our system of lots of different types of movement disorders, different types of seizures, and also things that mimic seizures. So we're working with teams to look at how we can use home video to train algorithms for machine learning to diagnose epileptic seizures. So we have colleagues in the University of Dundee, Emmanuel Trucco and Stephen McKenna, who we're working with. And we have got a very preliminary grant from Epilepsy Research UK to just begin some early work on this. And we are putting in grants to other funding bodies. As always with these things, often you're unsuccessful the first time, but we're going to keep going because we think this, I think probably already we must have the largest collection of seizure videos, maybe in the world, maybe definitely of home videos that's curated, classified as well. And that's a key thing. Because it's curated and classified, we can search for all the focal seizures with impairment of awareness, all the infantile spasms, all the, things that may mimic seizures, such as infantile shuddering, and therefore collect those. We have put through a national research ethics application, and we have approval now in the UK for a neurology video database for children and adults, and also importantly adults with what is termed in the UK with incapacity or with learning disability. So we have gone through all the process to ensure that we get the appropriate consents for adults as well. So we're quite excited about the use with AI, because as you know, there are insufficient neurologists even within Europe. But in other parts of the world, particularly low and middle income countries, there are a real paucity of expert neurologists for assessing movement disorders, assessing seizures. But if you can get this technology out to anyone who has a mobile phone with video capability, then potentially they could get that to someone, hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away, who is an expert to look at that video. And then if we can also incorporate AI into that, that may help some of that screening as well, and may say, well, actually, definitely this video needs to be seen by a specialist. So I don't think AI will replace the clinician. I hope not. But it will enhance our clinical practice and may help in these referral pathways as well.
Yeah, you were actually guessing what my next question would be, is that you wouldn't see, or at least you don't seem to have encountered much resistance from colleagues or from other hospitals in how to embrace or let's say implement this new platform. So you don't see this as a competitor to human clinical practice.
No, I don't see. I think in neurology we use lots of video. And so we've always, I think neurologists have always wanted a better way of managing our video. So the concerns, and there are sometimes concerns, sometimes hospitals are concerned because they think, oh, if we start the pilot and we pay for, to start the pilot, we know this will be successful, we will have to pay for it. So this is the way some of these health managers think. We don't want to try something that's going to be successful because we know we'll have to pay for it. So, which seems crazy, but that's the way the world works. And then occasionally there are colleagues who say, oh, well, will I be able to manage all these videos that come?
Yeah.
Will I have a family that sends, 20 videos? We have occasional families that put lots, but that's very rare. So on average, for everyone we register for this system, we have 2 videos in the last year.
Okay.
So we've had almost 1,000 patients and 2 videos. What I'm really excited is some of the collaborations we're beginning now with colleagues in University College London and University of Oxford, Charles Newton and Arjun Sen, who have worked very closely in some African countries, and also some projects in India, where we want to incorporate this platform amongst some wider work they're doing in terms of improving access to care for people with epilepsy and neurological disorders. We also have a nice project with the University of Austin in Texas with Professor Dave Clark there. And he does work in remote Caribbean islands. And there are some of these Caribbean islands, there are no neurologists. There are no specialists. So he travels there every so often and will see patients, or will see, do telephone consultations. But he wants to trial this platform for getting the videos within St. Lucia and Dominica as well, and coming back to Texas as well. So there are these pilots going on around the world that we hope will show that it's not just in Western Europe that this is going to be efficacious, but more internationally.
But I think that at our digital event, Sameer, you mentioned that you have been in touch with WHO because they were interested in let's say, the way such a platform can contribute to the global action plan on Well, epilepsy and other neurological conditions. And I know that Tarundua was quite supportive of this platform,
Yeah.
particularly as you mentioned the solution it can offer in low and middle income countries.
So I presented the platform to at an EPNS meeting, and then colleagues there saw it and then introduced me to Tarun Dua. So we presented to Tarun Dua and the WHO Brain Health Unit, and they were very interested in the possibility, and we decided that we would work with them and Charles Newton and Arjun Sen, who are doing this project in Africa, to try and pilot the system. So there have been some challenges with COVID getting that up and running over the last year, but we hope. WHO are very interested in I think these technologies, and we're really one of I think the really positive things about that I've really enjoyed about this work is working with Ben Moore, who's the CEO of vCreate, and he has very much of an attitude that he wants to, he's a commercial company, so he's, has a commercial attitude within the Western Europe and the US and other countries, but he wants to give this platform without any cost to low and middle income countries. So we're working on models where hopefully this will be given without cost to low and middle income countries. And similarly, the diary system that they use is given without cost to children's hospices, around the UK. So I think that's a positive opportunity, and hopefully we can work with. We have plans to maybe see how some of the, maybe the big phone companies can maybe work with us, because in many parts of, particularly remote parts of the world, there's no internet access, so people rely on 3G or 4G networks, and social media is often given free within their data packages. So it'd be really nice if some of these big phone companies said, well, actually, we're going to give health apps for free within the data packages. So if they give, they give social media for free, so if we can, persuade some of these big companies to say, actually, if they're uploading a video of their child having a seizure, then may use many megabytes, but that's not going to come off their tariff. Then I think that will also improve access.
That would be a true innovation for the future, I guess. That's probably something to put on the table of WHO, definitely.
Yeah.
Sameer, I think we're reaching the end of this podcast. But before concluding, I wanted to maybe leave you the opportunity for last word or last remarks.
No, I think I'd just like to say thank you, Fred, for giving this opportunity to talk about the system. It has been really successful, and I think one of the reasons it's been successful is that it's been designed by neurologists and clinicians with a technology partner. Often in healthcare, we're given lots of technologies that are given to us, and we say, oh, this doesn't work because of this. But basically, we've designed it over the last year. We're continually changing it, continually evolving it, so it suits our purpose. And I think that's why it's been successful. And again, we're hoping to adapt it to different needs around the world as well. And we will add other things into it, for example, seizure diaries, other ways of communicating with the family, alerts for appointments, all these other things that suit themselves to use on a mobile phone. So it's bringing everyday technology into our clinical practice.
Well, thank you very much again, Sameer, for joining us today, and for these such a positive vibe in your last words. And thank you for sharing more details on this exciting innovation, which is really impressive as far as I can say. I believe this is a concrete step forward in digitizing the patient pathway for the better. Thank you as always to our listeners for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed today's Brain Talks episode. Until next time.